Hey, folks, welcome to the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast, where sheep and goat production is not just our hobby, it's our bread and butter. Hey, welcome, folks. Before we start off today, we just want to take a moment to say thanks for all who have subscribed and are listening and sharing our podcast. We also want to say thanks for all the feedback we've gotten. We're looking for ideas, topics to discuss, producers to interview. Also, just want to remind you, we are welcoming listener questions. We will try to compile those questions and do a question and answer episode with them once a month. If you got a question, you can call 717-310-3641, leave a message, or you can email me at leon@lostcreekwholesale.net. Also, putting the word out there that we at Lost Creek Wholesale are looking for dealers for our universal feeders. If you're a farm or ranch supply store that you think would be a good candidate, let us know. Maybe you're just a farmer or rancher and you think you would like to offer the feeders to your farming community in your area. Give us a call today about becoming a dealer. Thanks again. So now on to today's topic, episode number 3, Aseasonal Lambing. Hey, good day, folks. It's Leon here with Lost Creek Wholesale again. We're going to bring to you another episode here on the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. And Matt Nault is along with me again. Matt has been experimenting with aseasonal breeding and for several years now. I myself have done it a little bit, but Matt definitely has more experience in that than I do. So we're going to let Matt give a rundown of what has worked, what hasn't worked, and let's see what Matt has to say. How you been, Matt?
Good. It's a nice morning here, a beautiful weather. We're most of the way through our lambing season here. We still have some ewes that were either just bred late or we had bred some ewes to lamb here in March. So we still got some lambing going on. We have ewes out on cover crops grazing, which is awesome. It's always exciting. We'll do a episode on cover crops in the future here. But it's fun to get the sheep out of the barn this time of year with their lambs. So but yeah, aseasonal breeding, it's coming up. We usually start breeding end of April, beginning of May, but we'll get into those details a little more. But
sounds good.
Yeah.
Why do we call it aseasonal breeding?
Because it's out of season. So sheep and goats are like similar to deer in that the naturally they'd want to breed in the fall. However, we have breeds that do breed out of season pretty well. Some do it better than others, and we actually have a couple different breeds here, so we get to see some of that. Yeah, so that's the aseasonal breeding, is we're breeding out of season. I don't know what the definition of that term is exactly.
Like I obviously knew what it meant, but I was just curious. I bet some other people don't know what it means, and I just looked it up here, and the dictionary says aseasonal means not seasonal. So
out of
I don't know why you have to say it so complicated, but that's what we call it, aseasonal breeding.
Or spring breeding, I refer to it a lot, but spring breeding or fall lambing, yeah, it does get a little confusing.
Yeah, but you're contradicting yourself because aseasonal means not seasonal. So there's no aseasonal breeding means breeding any time of the year.
Wait, why?
According, because that's what aseasonal means, not seasonal. So we're using aseasonal and then we're calling it spring breeding. That's putting a season to it.
No.
If a sheep is truly an aseasonal breeder, it means it will breed any time of the year.
Yeah, but fall is still the natural season.
Yeah, it is.
So
but
when you're breeding in the fall, you're not breeding in the not season. I don't
all
know.
right. All right.
This is above my 8th grade education. I think we'll drop that.
We got the idea.
Yeah. But anyway, a little bit on how we really go back to how I decided to get into well, not only aseasonal breeding, we do accelerated lambing. So we try to lamb that a ewe could have 3 lambings in 2 years. And really what got me started on that accelerated lambing program is we were lambing, well, not to make it too lengthy, but when I started with sheep first, we were lambing in spring, April. We were going to do grass-fed lambs and all that. But as time went on, we kept pushing that lambing up into winter further till where we were lambing in January, February. So then we're lambing in January, February. We're weaning those lambs at about 2 months old, and then we put the ewes out on pasture all summer, and we have pretty decent pasture. We don't really have a lot of just really crappy pasture to turn them out to, which if you're going to do that once a year, lambing would actually be ideal. So we turn our ewes out on grass all summer, and we don't want to just leave them sit on the same pasture for too long, or we're ruining our grass. So we got to rotate them through, and they're getting fed way better than they should. So we end up with fat sheep when we want to breed in the fall. So that doesn't make sense. We're trying to hold these things back so they don't get too fat for us. So that's when I decided to try this accelerated lambing, so that we're always working the ewes. The way I see it, it's much easier to feed the ewes a little bit extra on top of their pasture and everything else they're getting than it is to try and hold them back. With our farm, our system here, trying to hold them back is not very practical. So that's where I decided to get into accelerated lambing, is just to keep my ewes working. So we did that. I don't know if this is maybe gotta be at least 6 or probably our 7th, maybe even 8th year that we're doing spring breeding. I'd have to look back at it. First year, just to give you a breakdown, first year we had, I think, about 50% of the ewes that we exposed bred, and that was, without ever doing spring breeding before. We really didn't do anything too fancy. We just made sure the ewes were in good body condition. We weaned the lambs off of them and turned rams out. And we had pretty good success. And I said, hey, this is a good start. This is going to be fun, as we select for those genetics more and add in some more different things that we do, we should get pretty good success. So next year we kind of do the same thing. I don't think we change much. Pretty much did the same thing. And we got, I don't know, 3 lambs out of, I don't know if we had maybe 60, 70 ewes exposed, and we had 3 ewes that lambed.
Been there, done that.
They all had twins. So we had a 200% fall lamb crop, but 3 ewes out of like 60 or 70 probably that we had exposed. So that was disappointing, to say the least. So, all right, back to the drawing board the next year. And it's been too long. I don't remember. I know we tried some new things the next year to try and get them to breed. And we got nothing, nothing, 0. And so then I'm like, all right, this is not good. This is not what we planned for. And I'm trying to think what we first started doing. I think then the next year we went to multiple sire groups where we were running 3 rams in with a group of ewes, and with our registered flock that makes it a little complicated because of we need to know which sires the lambs are out of. But anyway, we had pretty good success with that, and I forget, there was a couple years there that were kind of up and down, and we kind of think we were starting to get it figured out, and then we'd get a year that we just don't have as good success. So, and in talking with a lot of other shepherds, that kind of seemed to be the general theme that I got. Every once in a while you meet a guy he's been doing this for 2-3 years, and he just turns the rams out and the ewes breed and everything's great. But I've never met anyone that's been doing it for a very long time that just says, oh yeah, every year we just have great success. I'm sure there's guys out there. We'd like to hear about it.
Absolutely.
But it's something that's challenging, but it's still worth the while. The past 2 years here, and I'll get more into our program, but the past 2 years here with using seeders, we've had a pretty high success rate. And when we get that, when we get lambs born in the fall, it means we have fat lambs to sell in the winter time. That really helps out our bottom line. Those are some high price lambs in the winter, and we get an extra lamb crop out of them.
So tell us those are high priced lambs in the wintertime.
Probably just because nobody has fresh, nice fat lambs in the wintertime unless they're doing the fall lambing.
So
So with
most
with our ethnic markets that we're selling to, we're only selling a couple month old lamb. For us, it's usually a 4, maybe a 5 month old lamb at the oldest that we're selling at like 100 pounds, which is heavier than some guys will go for the ethnic market, but we find that's what's profitable for us.
Right. And so there's going to be heavy lambs on the market, but most of them are going to be older lambs.
Yeah.
And you start getting in the winter, don't they usually get either they're poor quality or else they're over finished probably because people are holding them back too long.
Yeah, most what I would see probably is just poor quality lambs. Guys ran out on grass and they didn't really do that well on grass, and then they tried to bring them in and put some grain into them in the fall, and they get some flesh on them, but they're just not the quality that a good young lamb is going to be. And just the in general, there's not as many lambs available in the winter. A lot of people that are new to sheep, think that, well, Easter and a couple holidays are the only holidays that you can really sell sheep. Well, the ethnic people in general eat lamb year round, so there's a market for them year round, and the supply is definitely less in the winter time. So it's the easiest time of year to market lambs. It's easy. You're gonna get top dollar for them.
Right. So one of the reasons that I tried fall lambing first, or one of the things that really pushed me to try it was I normally lamb end of January into February. So I have these lambs that are 2 weeks old, and I start watching market reports.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, boy, I wish those lambs were like 4 months older than what they were.
Yeah.
And so that kind of is what inspired me to kind of backpedal that lambing time several months, and that way I can capitalize on that higher lamb prices.
Yeah. And I think we need it as an industry. I think we need to get this spring breeding thing figured out so that we can have a steady supply of lambs year round. And the thing that's really nice for us is it splits our lambing up in essentially three lambings in a year. So any given year, we're January, February, we're lambing our main group. And then in May, we lamb the ewes that had lambed last fall. And then in the fall, we'll lamb whatever bred back in the spring. So it spreads out our lambing and gets us, fat lambs to sell more year round. So, um,
Right? Will give us some more consistent supply.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess well, maybe before we go further, I'll get into a little bit our program, what we're doing now, some things that we've tried, some things we still do that I'm maybe not sure how well or how much they help us. But um, so like I'd said earlier, when we started it, we were just pretty much weaning the lambs and then the lambs off the ewes and turning the rams out to the ewes. And I still feel that's a pretty important key to the spring breeding is to get those rams turned out pretty quick after you wean the lambs off the ewes, because I feel like that weaning lambs kind of resets the ewes and then sets them up to get their cycle again. And if you don't have rams there, I'm not sure that they're I should say, if you do have rams in with them, I think it'll help them to cycle. If there's no
Right.
rams around, I think there's a bigger chance they'll just never get started. And then if you try to get them started a month later, I think you're going to have a harder time. And this is a lot of this is just speculation on my part, but that's kind of what I see.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
The RAM effect plays a part.
One way to do that, if you don't want to breed him that first cycle, I think using a teaser ram and putting him in there right away, when you wean the lambs. One other thought I have with that is I'm not sure that they keep cycling in the spring like they will in the fall. So like in the fall, they'll just keep cycling until they get bred. I feel like, and again, I don't have a lot of scientific evidence on this or anything, but I feel like in the spring they're only going to cycle one or maybe two or three times and then stop. So I think we need to get them bred pretty quick. Um, so we did that. And then, like I said, once we started using the dual sire groups, I felt like that really helped. Now you have three rams in there chasing ewes, um, and and it just helps create that cycle, that excitement, and helps them get started cycling. So the using multiple sires definitely helped. And one thing we've learned with that also is with doing parentage testing, then we found out in multiple sire groups that sometimes there was one sire that sired 80-90% of the lambs. So from a breeding stock perspective, that was really cool to see because I don't think it was that those other rams wouldn't breed. It was just, it showed that that one ram was dominant, and that's Rams we want. So
Or it
that
could
was
be the other two were off fighting and one was getting all the work
right.
done.
Right, but it still shows you that one ram knows how to get used bred,
Right.
whatever the
Yeah.
reason was. And I know it's not a matter of those other rams not being able to breed in the spring, because in different sire groups, then we would see those other rams breed more in the spring. It was just that one ram was extremely dominant. And I don't know, but it could also be something with, you'll have multiple rams breed the same ewe. So it could be something with that ram's semen quality was higher. So even though multiple rams bred that same ewe, that was a ram that hit the target. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's just the theory.
It was a little more viable. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Uh,
So
so yeah.
the question I had was after you turn those rams in, when's your bulk or your lambs hitting the ground? Like how soon do you feel they're getting bred?
That varied every year. Typically, it was they started pretty quick, like they bred them pretty quick or not at all. But then we did have one year where it went 2 or 3 weeks, and then they started breeding ewes. But we've found when we get them to start cycling, it more cycle. So it's not
Hmm.
this long stretched out breeding. It's either they cycle or they don't. So like most instances was we turn rams out and the ewes that were going to cycle would cycle and get bred, with that one exception of one year where it went, I want to say maybe 2 weeks before they really started breeding ewes, and then a bunch cycled and they bred them, and then it was done. So there's something to kick-starting that cycling that gets the other ewes to cycle.
Right.
Um, which
So you don't
not
feel, go ahead.
not to jump ahead, but we're using cedars now, so that's really tightening up our lambing windows.
Hmm. So one of the reasons we put a teaser ram in, and just to clarify, so a teaser ram is a ram that's intact, but he's been sterilized. When we use a teaser ram, don't you feel that that ram's actually, he's going to be breeding ewes, but obviously they aren't going to take. And then when you put the good ram in, those ewes would be breeding on the second cycle, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal.
My concern with that was I'm not convinced that they're always going to have a second cycle. My thought, and again, I don't know how accurate this is. My thought was if that ewe cycles in the spring, I want to breed her
Hmm.
with a real ram right away.
Yeah.
I don't know, and yeah, I don't know on that, but that was my thought.
So what's the difference you're seeing now that you're using cedars?
Well, just to stay with my train of thought here, so
Yep.
we did start using the multiple rams. Um, all along we were trying to keep these using good nutrition, good body condition, because we don't get a chance to put weight on them after we wean lambs. We got to keep that weight on them because we're weaning those lambs and breeding them back in pretty short order. And it's hard to put weight on ewes after they're bred. You can do it for the first couple weeks maybe, but then after that you better not try, or you're going to increase your lamb size in the ewes too much. So we need to keep the ewes in good body condition, and that's going to help with breeding them back. They say I those fat ewes that weren't producing well to start with, I've found that don't tend to breed up as well, which is probably because in general our ewes are in pretty good body condition compared to some farms. But definitely the nutrition piece. And I think one thing I'm looking at a lot now is there certain minerals or vitamins, things like that that we're lacking that would help increase our spring breeding percentage. I think that's a big thing to look at. If your mineral vitamin nutrition needs aren't being met, that ewe's not gonna cycle as soon. So there's something to think about. Uh, Another thing we started doing was what they call light therapy. There's different ways to do it, but basically the concept is what triggers the ewes to cycle in the fall is the shortening of the days. As you get into fall, the days shorten, and that's what triggers the ewes to cycle. So ideally, if we were in a dark barn, like a old hog barn, we could just manipulate that with when we turn the lights on and just gradually shorten the days that way. And they've had some pretty good success with that. We're not in a dark barn, so we don't have that option. We lamb in a coverall building, and the ewes are out a lot. But what we do is we start about a month before lambing. We leave the lights on in the barn all night, and then we do that through lambing anyway. So the lights are on in the barn all the time. I mean, at night and during the day it's daylight, so it's full daylight for 2 months, and then we turn the lights out. Now we're back to the natural daylight, which is much shorter. And we do that about 2 months before we want to breed them back. Um, so we try to manipulate them that way. I don't know how much that helps. I know there's been some research that showed it works, it helps. I don't know. But it's something we're gonna have the lights on in the lambing barn in the winter over lambing season anyway. So we're just turning them on a little earlier to try that. Um,
Wonder what would
so
happen if you would put a timer on your lights and that you could gradually make those days get shorter. So you're going from 24/7,
Mhm.
and if you would make them start shutting off early in the morning when it's still dark
Yeah.
outside, I I wonder if that would have a bigger impact than just going cold turkey from just
It
just a thought I had.
No, and it probably would. Except it doesn't work for us because now we're going out on cover crops. Um, I mean, we could do it. We're still bringing the ewes in at night. I guess we could do it for a time. Um, but by the time breeding season rolls around, we're going to be out on cover crops without coming back to the barn at all.
Yeah,
But
that's
that
true.
is a thought to do it more gradually, and
I
I'd
mean, no, in
have to
poultry,
sit
that's how
down.
we would do it. We would
Yeah.
slowly up, like we would up the lights to induce better egg production.
Well, and that's what I was saying. If you're in a dark barn, you could do that better, but I guess we could still do that more gradually in our barn. I'll have to sit down and think through that a little bit because
I mean,
that
Zeisel
might be a
equipment
good.
could get you a timer, that would plug in, hook
All
up
I
to your
know
system.
it's not hard to get timers.
Hey folks, let's pause for a quick break and we'll be right back to the fun stuff. This call is sponsored by Lost Creek Wholesale, your universal feeder distributor in US and Canada. Looking for a way to supplement your livestock with ease? Consider a saliva lick feeder. Universal Feeders saliva lick feeders offer the ability to restrict livestock's intake to a preset amount, determined by the adjustment bar depth and width on the feeder. By narrowing the width and depth of the feed in the groove, this gives us the ability to limit the amount of feed that will stick to a sheep, goat, or cow's tongue. Using Universal Feeders' patent-pending easy adjustment system and saliva lick feature, we can limit sheep and goats to less than 1 pound per head per day and cattle to approximately 6 pounds per head per day. We also offer creep gate attachments for both small lambs and kids. Visit our website at www.lostcreekwholesalellc.com to find a dealer near you or give us a call at 717-310-3641.
We did that. So we had all these different things we were trying and stacking on top of each other. And again, my breeding success in the spring was gradually getting better. But then we again hit one of those years where we just hardly got any ewes bred. And that that's a big problem for us because we feed these ewes better during lactation to have them in good body condition. Then we wean the lambs and we feed the ewes really good again to put some flesh on them for breeding. And then we run rams in for a month. We keep a pretty short window in the spring because, like I said, we find if they don't breed in that cycle, they probably won't. And we don't want to stretch out our fall lambing anyway. We run the rams in for a month. Then we do ultrasound our ewes in the spring to make sure they were bred. But we can't do that until they were bred for 40 days. So after we pull the rams another 40 days, we ultrasound. And if we find out only a third of those ewes bred, and say we have 100 ewes and 30 of them bred, 60 of them didn't. Now we have 60 ewes that for over 2 months have been getting fed too well and they're fat. And well, what do I do now? Because I'm in another month or 2 months by that time, I'm looking at starting my fall breeding. So now I have fat ewes that I gotta almost thin down a bit before I breed them in the fall. And what we would do is we put those ewes in the barn and put them on corn fodder and maybe feed them a little bit of hay if we don't think our corn fodder is good enough. But we get those ewes to thin down a bit. But again, that's not what we want to do. So I was still a little frustrated that we were being successful with it, but not consistently. And that's a big thing. I want consistency. So that's where we started using seeders then. 2 years ago, I think was the first we used seeders. We had seedered all our Dorpers, I think, to start, and we did seeder our Romanovs because I wanted all of them to breed for sure. And then my Katahdins, I didn't seeder, but I ran multiple sires in with them because I still felt like that could work well. So, but we turned the rams out with marking harnesses on them, and the seedered groups they started breeding. And I'll get into our seeder program a little more, but the seedered group started breeding right as we pulled those seeders a day or two later. In the multiple sire Katahdin group, there's just nothing happening. Maybe one or two ewes bred, but there's just nothing happening. We had 60 ewes, I think, in that group, 3 rams, and just not much going on. And I said, well, I can't have this. So I think we did that for like 2 weeks. or so, and then we put cedars in half of that group, and that really helped. I think of the ewes that we seedered in that group, like at least I don't have these numbers in front of me, but at least 70, if not 80, I want to say it was 85% of those ewes that were seedered bred. So that's good. I expected that to jumpstart some more of the other ewes in there, and I don't think it really did. I mean, we did have some ewes get bred naturally in there, but I don't know that that helped a whole lot. But last year we just decided, for the time being anyway, cedars are going to be our standard protocol for breeding in the spring. Once we start getting consistent results with that, hopefully, I do think on our registered stuff we'll quit cedering again, just to figure out which are those natural spring breeders. So on the cedars, on our protocol for cedars, and this is just what I use. And what I've heard a lot of other people use. So with the cedars, they recommend that you put them in, and on the pack it says you put them in, you leave them in for I think 4 to 5 days, they say, and then you pull them, and a day or two later they should cycle and breed. But what we've found is we still weren't getting the success that we'd like. And in talking with other people that have been using cedars for a long time, most people are saying going 10 to 12 days. So leaving the cedars in for 10 to 12 days and then pulling them.
And you're seeing with following that protocol, that's what you did this past year, right?
No, I
Well, that's what
have
you're
not
going to
tried
do.
the 10
Okay.
to 12 days. So that the first year, well, the last 2 years we did the 4 to 5 days, and we would only pull 4 to 5 cedars per ram per day. So if I wanted to breed 15 ewes to one ram, I would leave some of them in there for a little longer. So, so some of them might have been 7 or 8 days till I got them pulled. And I'd only pull 4 or 5 cedars per day per ram. Um, so we have not tried the longer time period. Oh, what I was gonna say with that is, so last year we had really good success with our cedars in 23, or no, in 22, we had really good success with the cedars. This past year in 23, we didn't have as good success. It was still decent. It was still in, I think, the upper 60% of the ewes that were cedar bred. But I thought it should be better than that. And I think I'm hoping leaving the cedars in for longer is going to help us. And that's what other people are telling us on
Yeah.
that.
That'll be
So
interesting to see how that, if it makes a difference.
yeah, yeah, I hope, because if we're spending the money for cedars, and I didn't get to this yet, and for PG 600, that's costing us over $10 a ewe. I think it's maybe $12, something like that a ewe. We need a pretty high success rate for that to be workable.
There's a little bit of labor involved, and you're gonna have to run them
Yeah,
through the chute a couple times to make all that happen. And
60% is it's borderline anyway. I'd like to see at least 80% with all the things we're doing. So when we pull the cedars, we give them a shot of Peachy 600, and the labeled dose for Peachy 600 is 5 cc's. Have done research, however, that has showed there's no benefit to giving them over 2 3/4 cc's, and 2.5 seems to work fine. So we've just been doing 2.5 cc's of the Peachy 600, so that cuts our cost in half basically. So yeah, we do use PG 600. Oh no, that's kind of our program there.
Yeah, sounds good. It'll be interesting to see what results you get this year, tweaking those protocols some. So right now, your ewes are pretty much done lambing. How soon are you going to start? Like you're going to wean at 60 days. I guess you touched on this briefly at the beginning too, but you're going to wean those ewes at around 60 days, and you're promptly going to put the cedars in and put the rams in.
Well, and with cedars, I feel like we have a little bit more of a grace period, where we don't have to put the rams in right away. So I've actually been waiting a little bit. But we're also leaving the cedars in for 10 to 12 days. So, even that gives you some time to put a little bit of, at least get the ewes gaining weight, which is what we want. Um, so what we are planning to do this year, so our first lambs will get weaned. I forget the exact dates. I wrote it down when I want to wean the first ones, but it's close to middle of April.
Mhm.
And so some of those will be over 60 days, some will still be a little under of that first group. And then we probably won't breed those ewes back till around beginning of May. So we get maybe a week or so to dry them off, get them on good feed again, and then put cedars in and breed those ewes in probably like 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks after we
Mhm.
wean the
Yeah.
lambs. So, and we'll have some more groups, even with that first one, because it's going to be a pretty big group. We'll probably we might put cedars in two different times just to make it easier to cover all those ewes. And also, one thing to think about when you're using cedars is you bred all those ewes on one day. They're going to lamb over 2 or 3 days, the bulk of them, and they could be a little farther, but you're going to have one day where it seems like everybody lambs. So you got to be ready for that part of it. I like that because in the fall is a pretty busy time for us, but that way we can focus on lambing for like 1 week and we're done. So yeah, we'll get a nice short lambing when, but you do have to think about how many ewes you can lamb in one shot, and how many ewes you can breed in one shot. So we'll probably stagger it, and we'll have some ewes that lambed a little later. So we'll probably do another breeding cycle in, like, say middle to end of May, where we try to breed some more ewes. One thing I've found with that is, if those ewes don't cycle using cedars, we haven't seen any benefit in leaving the rams in, hoping they cycle the next cycle. And even if they would, that would stretch out our lambing further than I'd like. So I think, we're going to put the rams in, and over the time they're supposed to be cycling when we pull the cedars, and we'll probably leave them in for a week or so, and then breeding season will be done. That'll be it for
What
that
what
group anyway.
what gets
And
done gets
that's
done.
yeah, and that's the other the other reason I decided to use cedars is, um that lets us so in the springtime we have cover crops we can graze. So that lets us bring those ewes in, cedar them, turn them back out on cover crops as a whole group, and then when we're ready to pull cedars, we can bring them in, split them into the breeding groups we want, and we only need to maintain those breeding groups for a week or so, and then we can put everybody back together. It really helps the logistics of our flock with that.
So just a couple things. I know you and I have talked about and brainstormed about what all plays into this, what making it work or not working. Do you remember the year where I fed 3 times the energy requirements
Mhm.
to my ewes? Like that was while they were lactating, I guess, right?
Mhm.
When
Um,
did I forget when I started doing that? It
no, I think that was
was after.
after,
It was
while
after we
while
weaned.
you're trying to breed them. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so I guess it was after I weaned, made sure those ewes were dried off, and we upped their nutrition to, according to my tested hay and my feed I was feeding, we upped it to 3 times the energy requirements. And we didn't get any lambs that year.
Yeah.
Didn't make a lick of difference. And
Yeah.
you and I are feeding same mineral.
Yeah.
We bought rams for the sole. Well, one of the reasons we bought the ram we did, multiple rams I have bought. That one ram you and I bought was all trying to. We looked back at pedigrees,
Yeah.
looking how many times that ram's dam lambed in the fall, how many times her grand dam did, and all that,
Yeah.
trying to improve our chances.
Yeah.
I still have to wonder what effect that going out on that green cover crop plays, because that's one thing I wasn't doing different. And some of the years when we were doing everything else as the same as we could,
Yeah.
and you had better success.
Yeah. I think that's a huge part of it. Whether it's cover crop, good green grass, sheep definitely breed up better on good grazing than they will even in the barn when we think we're feeding them
Right.
everything they need.
I agree. There's something about that fresh forage. And I don't think it has to be cover crop. It could just be good pasture.
Yeah, and I think this is something I want to look into a little more. I know vitamin E is very important for reproduction, and I'm wondering if when we're in the barn, we're giving them enough vitamin E. So I feed the Premier One mineral, and they have a vitamin A, D, and E pack that you can mix in whenever you're on stored feeds. And their reason for doing it in a separate pack is because I mean it is expensive, so you don't want to feed it when you're out on grass, you don't need it. But also their reason is that they found out it doesn't hold up well in a complete mineral, so they want to mix that in right when they use it. I think we're going to feed that through our breeding season here this spring, even out on cover crops, to make sure those needs are up where they need to be.
Right.
So
Sounds like a good idea.
I think all these things play in: genetics, nutrition, other environmental impacts. There's a lot of things that play into this, I think.
Yeah, when people ask me what it takes to lamb out a season, usually I say genetics and nutrition, and maybe nutrition before genetics.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah. You know, and I have the benefit of having 4 different breeds here. So whenever you're in the genetic field, people, like, let's say you're raising Katahdins and you're not having success with spring breeding, people tell you, well, you just need to get the right genetics. You should try my genetics. They're proven spring breeders. And there's a piece to that, but it's not all of it. And I get the benefit with 3 different breeds that are very different genetically. I get to see how that it does help, but it's not a standalone thing. So like the Romanovs, I mean, I think they're probably one of the most out of season, aseasonal breeders of sheep that you can get. Maybe the Finns would be right up there, but they're about as aseasonal as you can find. Dorpers and Katahdins, I would say, are very similar with their ability to breed out of season. But so I get to see the different breeds that are very different genetically. So I feel it's not just genetics. It's complicated.
Well, and another benefit you have is you are managing those 4 different breeds a lot of the times together. Obviously not
Yeah.
during breeding because you're splitting them up by breed for your breeding groups. But so the right there, the nutrition is the same. This isn't 4 different farms with 4 different breeds. So
Right.
your nutrition is the same. So that levels the playing field, and that lets you see firsthand. You get a pretty good window into the genetic differences when it comes to those aseasonal aspects.
Yeah. I do think though the genetic piece of it is something we need to work on. And it would be really nice if in the future we get a EBV for a seasonal breeding, but that would be a very complicated EBV to get. We've had a lot of discussions about that already, and I don't see that anytime real soon on the horizon. It's just there's a lot of things that play into that to create an EBV like that. And um, Australia, which is where our EBVs come from Lamb Plan, they don't have a lot of interest in aseasonal breeding just with the climate they're in. So I don't think we can rely on them. So the number I've heard is if we have $1 million or something like that, we can maybe come up with a seasonal breeding EBV. But it's not just that; it's the data that we would need to record for that gets complicated too. So yeah, that's that.
All right. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up the
Well,
seasonal breeding discussion?
I did have one more thing. So another for flocks that don't want to do the accelerated thing like I'm doing, some people want to try and breed just for fall lambing, like they do in cattle. And I think that's great. But and there's some folks that are doing it with pretty good success. Um, I shied away from that because one of the first years that we had done spring breeding, I decided, hey, this is great. Some of these ewes I'm just going to keep back and breed for fall lambs again next year. And that was a year we didn't have real good success. And those ewes didn't breed back for fall lambs either. So there I had ewes sitting for a whole year not doing anything. So my problem with just trying to do the fall lambing is if you do that, you probably want to run your rams in again in the fall so that the ewes that didn't breed in the spring, that they'll breed in the fall and lamb in the winter time. Because otherwise you're going to have those ewes sitting there a long time not being bred. If you can get your flock to where it's consistently breeding for the fall, I mean, that would probably be the ideal way to get those genetics, but I don't know. I guess I haven't had enough success with the spring breeding that I would feel confident in doing that. And I think for us, for our farm here, the accelerated program's where it's at. But again, that fall lambing is something to consider. And yeah.
Yeah, very good. Hey, well, thanks a lot for your input there.
Yeah. So with all this, for our listeners, if you have ideas of things to try, if you've found things that work for you, if you have this all figured out, we definitely want to hear it. Any kind of input on this spring breeding would be really appreciated. It's something that I'm really passionate about. I think if we can get this dialed in a bit more, it'll be a huge help for the sheep industry, I think.
Definitely. And if you got it all figured out, I mean, give me a call like ASAP because I'm going to be weaning lambs here in about another month and a half or something. So
We'll record another podcast right away. We'll get you on a podcast right away if you have it figured out. Yeah.
all right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you folks all next time. Once again, this is the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast, where it's more than just our hobby, it's our bread and butter. Thanks for listening, folks. Come back and join us as we converse with farmers and ranchers who are leaders in the industry, interview nutritionalists and veterinarians that can answer questions and offer valuable information. Got that sheep or goat question you'd like answers to, or something you'd like to hear discussion on? Give us a call at 717-310-3641. Select the option for Sheep and Goat podcast questions and leave a detailed message. Or send me an email at leon@lostcreekwholesale.net. Thanks, and see you next time. Universal Feeders, feeding your livestock one lick at a time.